Hello. Welcome to Beyond Organic Wine. I'm Adam Huss. Thank you so much for listening. This episode features audio from the Embracing Hybrid Grapes conference that took place at UC Davis on January 26th, 2026. This episode is available for paid subscribers to the Beyond Organic Wine Substack. You can subscribe and listen to the full audio on the Substack app or at beyondorganicwine.substack.com. And a huge thanks to those of you who already subscribe and make this and all the other content at Beyond Organic Wine possible. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you. It shouldn't be controversial for me to say that the genetics of our wine crops should be one of the important criteria used in determining if we qualify as practicing regenerative viticulture. It shouldn't be controversial to say that a baseline for regenerative viticulture needs to be grapes that are adapted to the environment where we grow them, and that part of determining whether a crop is well adapted to where it is grown is whether it needs off-farm inputs. So it shouldn't be controversial to say that for us to claim the label of regenerative or regenerative organic viticulture, we need to be selecting grapes that are genetically resilient in our climate and resistant to the local pressures of our farm. It shouldn't be controversial, but I'm afraid that it likely is. Why is that? What if we grow a crop like cacao in Canada? We could do it by building acres and acres of climate-controlled greenhouses, similar to how we might grow plants on Mars. But would we be okay with calling this regenerative? Even if we grew the cacao in soil that we heated with some kind of probe technology and grew cover crops around the trees and grazed each greenhouse rotationally with sheep and chickens. Should this kind of high-input farming count as regenerative? I don't think I'm alone in suggesting that implicit in the term regenerative is more than a suggestion that the farming system could be able to exist and be productive to some extent in that location without human inputs other than time and energy. And our regenerative certifying organizations more than imply this in their certifying criteria. Take, for example, the regenerative standards from the Framework for Regenerative Organic Certified, published at regenorganic.org. Important criteria include minimal soil disturbance and reduction of off-farm inputs. Also, interestingly, under Section 5, Use of Prohibited Substances, we find the following. If used, organically approved pesticides that are highly toxic to pollinators, as defined by Xerces Society's Toxicity of Common Organic Approved Pesticides to Bees, shall not be applied within 50 to 100 feet of a water body or applied when pollinators are in flight. They shall be applied at the lowest efficacious rate, and all effort shall be taken to find alternative controls. What's interesting about this is that horticultural oil and copper sulfate, two very common organically allowed fungicides used in growing grapes, are categorized as highly toxic to pollinators on the Xerces Society's list and therefore fall under the requirements of this regenerative organic standard. And sulfur, the most commonly applied spray in viticulture, while categorized as mildly toxic, is noted as having long residual toxicity. If you grow varieties of grapes that require you to spray with one of these substances, when you could be growing varieties of grapes that don't because of their genetic resistance, are you actually taking all effort to find alternative controls? And if you could grow grapes that only need to be sprayed once per year, but you choose to grow grapes that need over 10 sprays per year, are you really making the best effort to minimize soil disturbance and reduce off-farm inputs? Additionally, the appropriateness and resilience of a crop has economic consequences. The extent to which a crop doesn't grow well within the limitations of the farm's environment increases the costs of farming it. At some point, the cost of inputs exceeds the value of the crop, and it doesn't make sense regeneratively or in any other way to farm it. The problem is that some high-value crops allow you to push the limits of unsustainably incompatible crops for a region. Until recently, the varieties of grapes commonly used for wine have been a high-value crop, and in some regions, a very high-value crop. So high, in fact, that we've been able to almost ignore their lack of genetic resilience on our wine farms. But things are changing. Farming costs continue to rise, while bottle prices cannot rise much more without moving many small production wines into price points that only a small and shrinking percentage of drinkers are willing to pay. $9,000 to $12,000 per acre farming costs for regenerative organic Pinot Noir in California's Central Coast, for example, only makes sense if you can charge over $50 or $60 per bottle for your wine. Are we going to cut vineyard worker pay so that we can make an affordable bottle of wine? That's neither sustainable nor regenerative. And this isn't a great time for people to be raising bottle prices. But what if we could significantly reduce farming costs by using grapes that required fewer inputs because of their genetic appropriateness for our region? What if you opted to grow a variety of grape that was more productive than Pinot Noir and that only needed to be sprayed once instead of 12 times per growing season with an organic fungicide and still had no loss from mildew? That's starting to sound more regenerative from an economic perspective as well as a soil health perspective. Genetic resilience and appropriateness of our wine crops need to be considered as vital evaluation criteria for regenerative viticulture and certainly regenerative organic viticulture. Where we draw that line of genetic appropriateness will be determined by many factors. But if we really care about regenerative viticulture, we need to start addressing the reality that our current popular wine grapes require us to compromise in areas of soil health, reducing off-farm inputs, and increasingly in economic viability, no matter where they are grown. Should we be allowed to continue to call our farming regenerative when we continue to choose to make these compromises when there are other grapes we could grow that could minimize these compromises and even in some circumstances eliminate them? Should we get to be certified regenerative regardless of where and what we grow? This episode features Tommy Fenster presenting on his multi-farm, multi-year study of regenerative viticulture at the Embracing Hybrid Grapes conference. Tommy describes the goal of regenerative agriculture as reducing off-farm inputs by increasing the biodiversity of the farm. Diversity of genetics in our crops is part of this biodiversity and drives the profitability of our wine farms. Tommy's presentation also has slides that go with it, and both the presentation and the slides will be available at the Beyond Organic Wine Substack. Enjoy. So while Tommy's setting up, and what he has to show is some incredible stuff. And as I mentioned, Tommy is kind of the reason we're all here today, frankly. Thank you very much, Tommy. So I don't know how else to introduce him, but that's probably a pretty good introduction. And you will hear what he has to say now.
All right. Awesome. Let's see. I have 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm just going to set my timer so I don't go over. Here we go. All right. Awesome. So my name is Tommy Fenster, and I am wrapping up my PhD here at Davis with the Gaudin Agroecology Lab, where I'm co-advised by Amelie Gaudin, as well as John Lundgren with the Igdices Foundation. And so my research and the research of our labs really focuses on how can regenerative management in the vineyard improve the sustainability of these vineyards, the resilience, while not sacrificing yield and fruit quality. But within that, and whether we're talking about agroecology or regenerative agriculture, it's really about taking a systems level approach. And it's not just about management in the vineyard. If we want to take these next steps with regards to sustainability and resilience.
Beyond Organic Wine is made possible entirely by subscribers, and the rest of this episode is available for subscribers to the Beyond Organic Wine Substack only. You can subscribe easily at beyondorganicwine.substack.com or at the Substack app. Thank you so much, and a big thanks to Matt Wood of the Indie Wine Podcast for helping record the audio for this episode at the Embracing Hybrid Grapes conference, and a big thanks to Colton Pro for this beautiful closing music.